One of the most watched reviews we have ever done was of Sony's HT-A9 home theater system, and for the past year at least, you all have been asking, when is the Sony getting an update? Well, Sony just announced the update to the A9, and of course, we have it. Sony's dropped the old HT-A9 moniker. This revolutionary home theater in a box system now goes by the name Bravia Theater Quad, and yes, that is with the fancy British spelling of theater. The Quad, as the name suggests, comes with 4 wireless loudspeakers that can be connected to either of Sony's, sadly still not included, subwoofers, the SW3 or SW5. The 4 main speakers are completely redesigned for 2024. Gone is the cylindrical shape of the HT-A9, replaced instead with a far more decor-friendly flat design clad in a neutral fabric. Inside each of the matching 4 speakers, you're going to find 4 drivers. I'm talking about a dedicated tweeter, mid-range, and bass driver, and all of those face forward. Along the top rests the speaker's upward-firing Atmos driver. Each speaker is driven by its own internal amplifiers, which combine for a total of 504 watts, though this does not include the subwoofer. Speaking of subwoofers, yes, this system still needs a sub. Now, in our original review of the HT-A9, we relied very heavily on the costlier and more powerful SW5, as we felt the smaller SW3 didn't quite do the job. For this review, we were only sent the SW3, and in our new space proved surprisingly powerful enough. So I'm going to amend my previous critique of the smaller sub and say, pair whichever sub works best for you and your budget with the new quad theater system. One last note, you can only pair 1 subwoofer to this system, which is kind of a miss, in my opinion. The Quad also comes with Sony's control box, which serves as a hub allowing all of the speakers to communicate wirelessly with your HDMI-equipped TV. If your TV doesn't have HDMI, you're basically out of luck with the Quad. HDMI is the only real input-output option on the control box. That means 1 input and 1 out with ARC/ERC support. The control box supports signals up to 8K, 4K, 120 with or without HDR, including Dolby Vision. And the Bravia Theater Quad system also has support for gaming functions like VRR and ALLM. While the control box is limited in physical connections, you do get wireless features like Wi-Fi, Bluetooth version 5.2, AirPlay 2, and Spotify Connect. Before I get into the Sony setup and sound quality, let's talk control. The Quad can be controlled in one of 4 ways. First, by using the included small and very basic remote, which is likely to be voted first to get lost in your sofa cushions. Next, thanks to HDMI and CEC, it is possible to control the system's volume using your existing TV remote, which in our case, we used an Apple TV remote. Now, if you own a compatible Sony TV, like our 98-inch X90L, upon connecting the system to the TV's HDMI, ARC, and EARC input, the Bravia Theater Quad's various options are automatically transferred to your Sony TV's quick menu, which is super cool and convenient. But if you're not a Sony TV owner, don't worry. There is the new Bravia Connect app, which anyone can download. The Connect app has been completely overhauled and features a new UI that is very easy to use. You will need to download the app to get the Quad up and running and to auto-calibrate the speakers in your room, but it's not an app that you have to use day to day. Now, some of the system's more consequential settings are a little bit hidden inside the app, but we're going to get to that in just a bit. Now, you may have noticed, like the old HT-A9, the new Bravia Quad system has no center channel. That said, owners of a compatible Sony TV can connect and use your TV's internal speakers as the system's center channel via the Quad's S-Center Sync cable. Obviously, I don't have every Sony TV to test this function. Still, I can say that I am not a fan of using this feature with our X90L. It's far from a good sonic match. So unless you like your dialogue to sound as if it's trapped inside a phone booth that's currently sinking to the bottom of the ocean, sorry Sony, I would skip it. Perhaps one of Sony's OLED TVs would fare differently, but me, I'd leave that cable in the box and forget all about it. But before you cross the Sony off your list, just because I'm poking fun at their S-Center Sync does not mean that you're SOL when it comes to dialogue. The Quad's 2 front speakers create a terrific phantom center with startling presence and clarity, even without Sony's new Voice Zoom 3 engaged. Sony includes both table and wall mounts in the box, which makes placing the 4 speakers in your room easy. Just place 2 of the speakers on either side of your TV and the other 2 behind your listening position. And Sony has even included longer power cables this time around, giving you more flexibility than with the original A9. Speaking of the original HTA9, call us lucky, but we never had any of the consumer-reported dropouts with our unit. I know some viewers had issues due to what may have been, say, a result of a congested Wi-Fi network. Whatever the cause, Sony assured me that they've made sure dropouts will not be a problem with the new quad. In my tests, both of the quad surround speakers worked flawlessly, even at distances greater than 19 feet from the control box, and the same was true of the subwoofer. To get the most out of the theater quad system, you will need to launch the Bravia Connect app and go through the calibration procedure, which only takes a couple of minutes to complete. The Sony uses your phone's built-in microphone to now calibrate the quad's 4 speakers, and the results are beyond dramatic. So if you want to experience Sony's 360-degree spatial mapping that you hear Christy and I just rave about, you can with the quad. Once calibrated, you can control the subwoofer's volume and rear speaker levels. You can also toggle the dialogue mode on and off, as well as play with the surround and night modes. Night mode cuts the subwoofer dramatically, which could come in real handy for those of you with, say, kids or nosy neighbors. But there are 2 settings that I kind of referenced earlier that are somewhat hidden in the menu that are worth noting: sound field setting and height of sound field. Sound field setting lets you choose which of the 3 available surround sound processing profiles you want to use with your content: Sony Spatial Mapping, Dolby Virtualization, or DTS Neural X. Each has its own flavor and tone, so experiment with all 3 to find your favorite. I personally left mine in the 360 mode and I never looked back. The height setting, though, that literally shifts the perceivable center plane of the sound up or down based on the height of your TV. It's noticeable and can affect the system's overall frequency response, so beware. After running the calibration inside the app with Sony's 360 mapping engaged and everything else in its default setting, the Bravia Theater Quad with the SW3 subwoofer produced an in-room response that reached down to about 35 Hz that extended out to 20 kHz, though the highs start to roll off around 15K. But from the mid-range up through the treble, I was shocked at how linear the Sony is. Admittedly, I found the bass to be a bit much, a sound that is more, say, brute force than finesse, but lowering the subwoofer's volume down to -4 resulted in a more coherent sound and a response in our room from top to bottom. Now, and this is really important, because Sony isn't radically changing or EQing the subwoofer's response, proper placement will be key in obtaining the most coherent sound with the quad's 4 speakers. I placed the SW3 along our sidewall between the front and rear speakers. No matter what, unless you're willing to sacrifice bass, either sub is going to juice the bass in order to create a more impactful cinematic experience. The more you lean into this, the more you may notice a gap between the sub and the speakers start to emerge. So while the SW3 has the power to kick you right square in the gut, restraint is going to win the day and give you the best overall sound and experience. Now, one of the biggest issues facing soundbars is their difficulty to deliver solid stereo playback. In other words, music, even 2-channel, processed into pseudo-surround. Soundbars struggle to replicate the sound of a pair of traditional speakers working together to create a phantom center image. While soundbars tend to have a very strong center presence because all of your drivers are located in one single bar, they often collapse the rest of the music, think performers and instruments, down towards the center as well. Soundbars can be great for watching TV and movies, but they're often a little hit or miss when it comes to music. The quad system, however, does not have this problem. Obviously, thanks to the quad's individual speakers, listeners can enjoy a more traditional stereo sound. That said, ironically, the Sony sounds best when using all 4 of its speakers, even for stereo playback. The auto upmixing does a great job differentiating between 2-channel and multi-channel content, allowing stereo tracks to sound more or less like they would if you were listening to a good old pair of bookshelf speakers. Tonally, the quads are very neutral in their default setting. I'm talking ruler flat in room, which is stunning. However, on their own, the quad speakers have no appreciable bass, and in my opinion, you need to use one of Sony's compatible wireless subs to fill in everything below about 100 Hz. While this isn't uncommon in home theater setups for stereo, even small bookshelf speakers, like take for instance our Lumina 2s, can play down to 50-ish Hz, which is enough to give most listeners a sensation of bass, whereas the Sonys are decidedly light all on their own. And like I said, we used the smaller SW3 sub, and once it was properly placed and balanced with the rest of the speakers, the Bravia system is very, and I mean very effective when listening to music. Sure, I wish there was a little bit more granular control over the sub's overall volume, as I found in our room, and my measurements kind of back me up on this. Having a setting between, say, -4 and -5 would have been ideal. Regardless, this is still one hell of a stereo package, coming from what most would say is a primarily home theater tool. Now, the center image and intelligibility of singers like Amy Dowd of the Lastlings, or even less articulate frontmen like Tool's Maynard Keenan, were always presented clearly and in such a way that, to me, they felt very true to life. However, the low mid-range or mid-bass weight and vocal accuracy depends very heavily on the sub and its proper setup. Because the Sony system on its own is exceedingly neutral with stereo source material, it is very easy to manipulate its neutrality, either by turning the sub up or down or engaging the dialogue enhancements. Watch the conversations surrounding the Sony change like the weather. Not enough bass, the critique will be that the Sony is thin or lean sounding. But if you have the subwoofer up too high, you'll watch the conversation skew to chesty or muddy. Turn on the dialogue enhancement, and some might even use the word shrill when describing music playback through this system. And I say that because I did. But with voice enhancement set to off and your subwoofer set up correctly, the Bravia system is among the better home theater in a box systems that I have heard for listening to music, comparable to the likes of a pair of Sonos Era 300s or even modest bookshelf speakers like Klipsch 50Ms or Acoustics 3020i when driven by a good integrated amp or receiver. Now, when it comes to the Bravia's SOUNDSTAGE, this system is really impressive. With strict stereo tracks, it does not overcook the surrounds, creating a false sense of surround sound, which is a very good thing. And this is common with a lot of soundbar systems trying to play back stereo tracks. They often send a little bit too much information to the rears, and it kind of creates like a quad or all-channel stereo situation. The rears on the Sony, in their default setting or volume, only serve to flesh out the front of what I would call a traditional soundstage when listening to music. If you like to bask in the scale of big orchestral works, think films and soundtracks from, say, Hans Zimmer, the Bravia delivers. The Sony also has the dynamic chops to bring this kind of music and its scale to life. Switching gears to movies. Now, I'm just gonna come right out and say it. This system is better than any soundbar system I've heard around the Sony's $2,500 asking price. It's better than our current reference soundbar, the Samsung Q990C, and it holds its own against the Sonos Arc, outfitted with a pair of Era 300s and a sub, even besting it in the dialogue clarity department. Now, I will admit, the Sonos sub is better than the Sony SW3 and SW5 in terms of its overall nuance and depth. However, when watching a movie, I'm not sure the gains the Sonos sub provides will always be immediately noticeable to most listeners, but I digress. Watching the newest Ghostbusters Frozen Empire in Dolby Atmos through the quad system without Sony's TV as a center was as close to what you can get from a modest dedicated theater as I've ever heard. No embellishing here. The Sony hangs and even embarrasses basic home theaters built around 4 to 6 inch two-way bookshelf speakers, a sub, and an AV receiver. For example, I want you to picture 5 Q-Acoustic 3020i's or maybe even Arendal's 1961 bookshelf speakers with a modest 8-inch sub driven by, say, an Onkyo 5100. The Sony quad system is not only comparable, but given the strength of its overhead and virtual channels, it's actually better. Before any of you hit your keyboards, no, the Sony doesn't embarrass our reference KEF R Meta Theater, nor a home theater comprised of Bowers & Wilkins 700 Series 3 speakers with dedicated Atmos channels. But if I were a betting man, the day is coming sooner than later when it does. The scale, dynamics, clarity, and precision of sound placement is crazy good. Left to right, front to back, and overhead, the Bravia system transforms a room sonically and puts you right smack dab in the thick of the action. Like the HT-A9 before it, the quad speakers, along with the Sony's 360-degree spatial mapping, are so effective that once again, I felt as if I was hearing more subtle cues in the mix than through other speakers. Even some of our reference ones, they just simply do not shine as bright a light on these little cues. Take the Let's Play House scene from Baz Luhrmann's Elvis. This perfectly illustrates what I'm talking about. The crowd noise, that general mulling, just the little bits of noise here and there. It was rendered in such a way that I damn near pulled my neck out, craning my head around as I kept thinking Christy was sneaking up on me. And this is what I love most about Sony's spatial mapping. I think with little to no fuss, it gives listeners a truer sense of what I believe a mix probably sounds like in the studio rather than how it often sounds after it's been watered down to meet the various standards of playback. The Bravia is so precise in this regard that it can make even some traditional home theaters sound, well, vague in comparison. But best of all, the Sony all but disappears sonically and visually in your room, making it easier to focus on enjoying the movie rather than having your attention pulled away to the gear. Regardless of the film or television series, dialogue is clear. However, if you engage the dialogue mode, at least in my opinion, it can become too clear. Based on my testing and in-room measurements, it would appear Sony's clear voice tech boosts the treble as much as 5 dB, starting somewhere around 2 kHz, while attenuating the bass. While 90% of content, music, or movies, I found clear voice's enhancements resulted in a more etched and brittle top end. That said, it saved Christy from having to constantly ask, what did they just say? When watching poorly mixed series. The gentleman on Netflix, I am talking about you. I guess the silver lining is you can choose to use it or not use it. It's just a tool and not a sound that is baked in the cake. As it stands, I think the Bravia Theater Quad system with the SW3 or 5 sub is peak home theater one-stop shopping. For most people who want a home theater but don't want to become a home theater nerd, the Quad is the better way to go, and I maintain it's better than most soundbar systems, all things considered. But this is no longer a first-gen product, and sorry, you don't get a pass this time around, so Sony, come here for a second. Sony, love ya. But this system needs a new, more tunable, and well, you did it to yourself, a more stylish subwoofer that is included. I don't want to get into the argument over, but we give customers choice, blah, blah, blah. This is a home theater in a box, so put everything the customer needs in the box. And congratulations, you did a great job updating the Quad styling, but now your old subs need a refresh. The SW3 and SW5 subwoofers look like they were made for last-gen products because shocker, they were. But going beyond the superficial, it's time for you to give users the ability to adjust the EQ, to better tune the sub, or at least give us more granular control over the sub's volume. Both will take the whole experience of this system from great to God tier. And while I love the small, unobtrusive control box, I'm worried you went a little bit too Apple here. You had to know eliminating all inputs not named HDMI were gonna tick some people off, especially those who are still rocking plasma TVs. Yeah, they are. And I know those displays are dinosaurs, but including an optical or even a simple analog audio input would have gone a long way in making those people happy. Lastly, Sony, I know Christy loves your voice zoom tech, but what's with it only being available on or off? Give me low, medium, and high or something. Perhaps this can be done in a firmware update, I don't know. But going full send on the treble? Not very subtle. I feel better. Like the HT-A9 before it, Sony has made what I believe is a worthy successor to what was already a stellar first outing. The new Bravia Theater Quad system with the SW3 subwoofer is hands down better than its predecessor in every appreciable way, including reliability. After a lot of thought, I truly do believe that for the vast majority of people, young and old, the Bravia represents what is likely to be all of the home theater you'll ever need. I think home theater really does start here. Unless you know you want to expand your system down the road or get into the weeds with chasing components over time, the Bravia system is enough. And it is certainly better than most soundbars on the market right now. I love it. And I'm gonna hang on to it as a reference point, not just for soundbar comparisons, but for home theater systems in general, because it's that freaking good. So that's it for me. If you skip to the end hoping for comparisons, you're gonna have to go back to the beginning and watch the video because you've already missed a ton. Of course, you can leave your questions in the comments where they might get a shout out from Christy on Friday's new Unplugged. But until then, If you like this video, please do give it a thumbs up, like, and subscribe. Go ahead and ring that bell so that you're notified when new videos come out. If you use any of the links that Christy left for you down below, know that that's a great way that you have continued to show your support for this channel and the work that we do here. And both of us, thank you very much for doing that. Follow me on Instagram at recoveringaudiophile, and that is it for us today. So remember, the only person who has to like the sound of your system is you. So happy listening, everybody. Thank you so much for watching. See you Friday with Christy's thoughts on what she thinks of the Bravia Quad system. Until then, have a great one. And yeah, thanks for watching.